There's something that nobody warned you about before you start homeschooling. And a lot of times we talk about the curriculum decisions and the scheduling and making sure your kids won't fall behind and even the socialization of your kids. But has anybody ever sat you down and said, you're going to start homeschooling, and this is going to be one of the loneliest things that you've ever chosen to do? I don't think they have they? And the part that might make you feel like something is wrong with you, and the part that we're going to talk about today, is that you are really never actually alone. So your kids are always right there, and you're together all day, every day. And somehow in the middle of all of that togetherness, you can feel completely unseen. If that's where you are, if you've been carrying that quietly and wondering why it feels this heavy, I want you to stay with me today, because I think you are going to have an opportunity to say out loud what you might not have said to anyone else, and most importantly, what you might not have said to yourself. Welcome to another episode of the Catch Your Breath podcast. I'm your host, Inga, and I am super excited that you are here today. Before we get started, I want to ask you sincerely, how has your week been? Have you taken a moment to stop, to ask yourself how you're doing, and then to catch your breath? Well, if you have not, I'm so happy that you're here, because that's what we're going to do right now. So let's take a moment and stop. We're going to breathe in slowly for a count of 4. We're going to hold for a count of 4, and then we're going to let that air out for a count of 6. Ready? Let's do it. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, if you need to do this again, if you are not ready to move on and you need more than just one deep breath, you need to catch your breaths, plural, a couple of times, please go back, rewind this, or do it by yourself, and then come back whenever you're ready. There's no rush here. This is the place where I want you to know that you truly being able to breathe matters to me. So before we jump into anything, I always want you to have the opportunity to catch your breath and get some oxygen to your brain as we talk about these things, okay? All right, let's get started. Today, we're going to talk about why homeschooling can feel so isolating, because I think that when we take the time to understand why, then we don't feel like we have to blame ourselves for the feeling, because we never, ever, ever want to blame ourselves for the feelings that we have. The feelings aren't always what we want to have. And sometimes there might be things in that feeling that we got wrong, but we're having the feeling. And so we normalize that we have it and we go from there. We always start from, where's the feeling? What's the feeling that I'm having? Let me face it. Let me be able to frame it before I can do anything else with it. So when I was a classroom teacher, I remember that I would close my door and then I would do my thing. And my classroom really was my world during the day. It was just, yes, we would go out to have lunch sometimes, but that was the place where I was completely, into that whole thing where I couldn't see anything else. But then when the bell would ring, I would walk into the hallway, or my colleagues would come into my classroom, and I then had somebody who I could catch my breath with, because they understood the specific exhaustion of the work that we had just done. And we could say the real thing, not the polished version, but the real thing of like, oh, that was really hard. So-and-so did this. Oh, that test that was coming up. I can't even believe that. I didn't get to do this. And I didn't even really think about it as much, but I now know that it mattered more than I realized at the time. Because now when we homeschool, and as a homeschooling mom, you close that door and then you don't really come back out to a hallway, because there is no hallway and there's no break room and there's no colleague down the hall who gets it. There's just you and your children. And trust me, this is no sort of anything on your children, because we love our children and they're wonderful. But the reality, what we truly know, is they're not our colleagues. They're not our iron that can sharpen us. They are the work, and the work needs you, whether you're okay or not. And I know for some of us, as I say that they're the work, it's like, no, no, no. And I don't mean that in any kind of bad way, but it's just us recognizing why it might feel the way that we're feeling. And that loneliness, I don't believe that there's anything wrong with feeling the loneliness. I feel like that is a spiritual yearn. That is something that God put in us because we weren't supposed to do life alone. And so I think that is a normal thing. And that is just kind of prompting us and pushing us to not get into the habit of thinking that we can do this in isolation. I think you have that feeling, but I think the part that I really started thinking about as I was thinking through this is that the reason why it can get so heavy, because I think, you know, each of us at some point go through, you might feel lonely. But I think the part of it is feeling guilty about feeling lonely in this life. I feel like so much of homeschooling is a choice that we have made to take on something that, according to the world, we don't have to take on. You do not have to do this. So anything that you feel because of this, any hard thing, it's on you because you chose it. And choosing something that you love and something that you even believe in is somehow, some way means that you can't have any amount of angst or whatever. So when the loneliness creeps in, there's this voice that says, you don't get to feel that way because you picked this. This is on you. And then that guilt on top of the loneliness, I feel like is what makes it heavier than it already is. Because you're not just lonely now, you're lonely and you're ashamed of being lonely. And you're afraid to really say it because you don't want anybody to wonder what's wrong with you. Or it's like, it's a quick solve. Go get a job where you get to be around people every day, or put them back in school and then you can go in your Pilates class or whatever it is. Nothing against Pilates. I wish I could do it. My body just does not love it. So I don't come for me if you're like, Inga, there's nothing wrong with Pilates. I trust you, there isn't. But I want to tell you a little bit from me because I have dealt with this in my own life. And I think the hardest part for me, and it's hard to even say that and be vulnerable about it. Vulnerable. First, it's hard to say the word vulnerable. So clearly, we've got that going on. But I think what's hard is to really not just admit, but to say, I have been in a place where I've been surrounded by everything that I chose, all of it, husband, children, homeschooling, not choosing to go out of the home for working, even co-op, even, church and small group within church and like all those things, and still felt lonely in the middle of it. I know that as I've talked about it before, and it's still it's been 2 years, but it still feels fresh to me sometimes with my mom passing. But I feel like I had felt those feelings before she passed, and, like, after she passed, shortly after, it was like, bam. It just felt like the loneliness before it felt like the loneliness was something that I could, as it would start to kinda come on, I'd be like, "No, no, no, I'm taking this off. I'm not gonna be able to I'm not doing this. I'm not receiving this." But then after she passed, it was like it was painted on. Like, you could not take it off at all. And I felt what it made me realize in that place where I didn't feel like I couldn't come up. I I'm thinking of the best way to say it, and I feel like I was drowning in loneliness. And before, loneliness was like when I would start to get under a little bit, I could like do a little something to pull myself up and then be like, okay, we're good. But then this was just not something that I could push through. And it didn't feel like something that I could fix. And while I'm not necessarily saying that if you're feeling that a level of depression or true sadness in that way, that you cannot do it by yourself, that what we're going to talk about today is going to solve that, because you have to know when, I believe we can have therapy and Jesus. And so, yes, I had to have some of that, but I'm not talking about that deep, even though I'm saying like it felt like I couldn't pull it out. I think what the realization that helped me in this is that I wasn't saying it to people, and that I recognize that one of the things I do when I have those big emotions is pull away. because I hadn't felt like people could carry the weight of those big emotions, which is weird because I was like, oh, I could carry it. I could carry, all of my families and, all of my friends if they turn to me and all of that. But it's like, okay, good. I have enough space for this. I know how to handle this. I know where to put it. I know how to hold it. Like, I'm really good. It's like coming in with the grocery bags. Like, I got all the grocery bags. I can peel it out. I can get it. But then being like, wait a minute. Now here's mine. And I really don't know what to do with it. One of the things that I think hit me hard and was the beginning of really helping me to work through this was recognizing that this was less of a feelings conversation as it was a design conversation. Because I recognized that God did not design us for isolation. And that not wanting to be isolated, feeling lonely was not a personality type or a preference, but it is built into how we are made. And that when I started to really just sit with that and say, this support, this being in community, this drawing from each other is not truthfully, because I do believe that there are introverts and extroverts and all of that. And we kind of are learning a lot more about that, or you probably learned a lot or have labeled yourself as that. And so sometimes it's like, okay, so the introvert it's okay for them to kind of be by themselves. And I don't necessarily think that's what it's saying, because I think that an introvert can still yearn for connection and community. And the Bible tells us in some very clear ways that that's how he meant for us to be. In thinking about iron sharpening iron in Proverbs, or one of my favorite is just when I really start to look at the early church, and I had read that before as I'm younger, and you kind of read the Bible, okay, but you kind of all with your friends. And so it doesn't, for me at least, didn't hit the same way as when I read it in the midst of what I was going through and say, wait a minute, the early church didn't scatter and do life alone. They did it together in community, in people's homes, bearing one another's burden. And I do believe that that's where the loneliness hits the hardest, is the burden stage, is when you have a hard day, when you have a hard season and you look around and you feel like you don't have anybody. So you feel the loneliness of life and something in you says, I don't want to do this alone. I just don't. Like, I feel lonely. And that is a very normal, real, and as I believe, a design thing. The way that the God that made you has you feeling the thing that you were made to feel, is that the desire for connection. And it's, to me, it feels like the way that God wired us to push back against a circumstance that was never supposed to be permanent, because we were made for people. And so wanting people is not the problem. Wanting those relationships is not the problem. I do think that there are a few different ways that this loneliness can show up. And I want to name them, because if you can recognize yourself in one of those, I think once again, it goes further to normalizing this feeling that you have, then to be able to say, what's the one thing I can do with it? And then to be intentional and pursue not staying in that place. So there's a loneliness of being misunderstood. So it could be that when people ask how your homeschool is going and you say fine, because the real answer would just take too long. And you're not sure that they want to hear it. You think, we've told ourselves they want to hear the fine. And in some cases we do want to hear the fine, because we're just asking and passing. We're not ready for it. When the people that love you the most can't really understand why you do this, why it's so hard, or why you wouldn't just put them in school if it feels like too much. That loneliness is very specific and quiet and frustrating. And it can make you feel like you're speaking a language that nobody around you has learned. And so if you're in the midst of a bunch of people, whether it's family or work or whatever it is, that don't homeschool, don't get homeschooling, have not looked into it anymore, don't understand it, and they ask you how it's going, you already know they're not going to see me, they're not going to hear me, they're not going to understand me. So let me keep this to myself, and that can feel like loneliness. There's the loneliness of the hard days that you can't share. The days when someone cried through math and then you cried in the bathroom after math, or the days when you wondered if you were ruining them. Have you ever felt that? Just be honest. Have you ever felt like I'm ruining them? Like they would just be better with another teacher. What am I doing? Or the days when you thought about quitting and it wasn't because you didn't love it. It's because you were just so tired and there was no one to hand it to, even for just that hour. And you just felt like, oh my gosh, I can't do this and I'm alone in this. Those are the days that are just too heavy to hold alone. And then there's the loneliness that comes from the overwhelm of just everything else. When your schedule has no margin, when your days have no flexibility, when you're already running on empty and there is no room for the relationship that you would actually need and want and desire. And then you feel guilty about that because people will say, if you really wanted community, then you would make time for it. And it's not helpful. I know it's not. Because sometimes you're in the midst of a season that doesn't have room. And it doesn't mean that you're failing at friendship or that you don't want the thing that you don't have time for right now. Sit with that for just a second. Because I know that that is one of the things that is the heaviest, is looking around and feeling like I don't even have time for the thing that I need the most. And I don't even know how to give myself enough margin and enough flexibility to accommodate that in my life. And now I feel guilty about saying that I feel lonely because once I say that, and then people's like, well, just do this thing. And doesn't feel like it's just that easy for me to just do that thing, just go to that group, just be in that thing. Now I'm holding that as well. And that feels heavier. Listen, I am not going to give you a 5-step plan today because who has time for that? I don't really think that's what any of us need. What I want to give you is, as always, just one thing, one small breathable thing for today, your OTFT. And I want you to do it if you really can. I can't tell you what you should do, but I'm inviting you to do this, just like I've invited myself to do it and holding myself accountable. What are we going to do together? Well, we're going to stop calling the loneliness something to be ashamed of. That's it. That's the thing. We're not going to try to fix it. We're not going to try to solve it. We're not going to even sign up for a co-op as yet. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but just right now, we just want to stop treating this feeling like it's evidence that something is wrong with us. Because a lot of times that's where it goes. Like I say, we start there in some way, somehow the devil gets it back to what's wrong with me? There must be something wrong with me. I can't keep friends. I can't be in community, whatever it is. We just want to stop feeling that way. And we want to stop thinking that this is evidence of something else other than design, that God designed us to not do this alone. And we don't want to bury this under productivity so that we're doing more and we're joining more and we're being more. And we also want to stop performing fine when we're not fine. And that is, I'm raising my hand, that's the hardest one for me. I remember I was in a session once with the pastor who was counseling me. And we were talking about that. And he said, have you ever just admitted that you're not fine? And I was it was right in the midst of all of the pain that I was in. And my body was just in pain, like I could not explain. But I said to him, I said, no. He said, why? I said, because nobody wants to hear that. And even if they want to hear it one time, like when you're in chronic pain where you're having it every single day, does somebody really want to hear that? He's like, so you feel like you have to say fine. It's like, yes. And every time I say it, I feel like I'm lying through my teeth. And so that's just one of those things where I understand it, but I want to, and I'm telling you, God works all those things together because that is why I'm here. That's why I've built a breathable homeschool, a breathable life, is because of going through all that and saying, we've got to normalize the hard. We got to stop pretending because it's not doing any good for any of us. I want to encourage you that the loneliness that you feel is a signal. It's your own design telling you something true about what you need. And the first step toward anything better is letting that signal be true without judging yourself for receiving it. I'm going to say that one more time. That the first step toward anything better is letting that signal be true without us judging ourselves for receiving it. If that loneliness feeling is a signal, if it's something that's saying, okay, wait a minute, then we have to listen and we got to tune in and say, okay, because we don't want to do this alone. And that is one of the most human, most God-honoring things about us. And in our next episode, we're going to talk about what do we do with that? How do we start thinking about who our people actually are and what it looks like to find them? We'll get to all of that later on. But for today, I just want to normalize with you and allow you to normalize wanting it. It's okay to feel lonely in this. It's okay to feel alone because it's a true feeling. It is what it is, and it's not what it's not. Okay, I cleaned that up for you. I'm so sorry. Let me tell you what I really say. It is what it is, and it ain't what it ain't. And I feel like that to me is the normalization. Like, I'm not going to try to make it something that it isn't. And if it is a thing, I'm not going to try to say it's not that thing. That's what that basically means for me. I pray that this episode blessed you, that it opened your eyes to something, that it helped you to feel seen, to feel heard, to feel understood, and that you will share it with another mom who might need to hear it. Thank you so much. And I want you to remember to take a moment to catch your breath. Until next time.